Millions of Americans could receive much-needed economic relief by the end of the week as we approach 1 year since nationwide pandemic shutdowns began. The House is expected to cast the final vote on President Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan as early as tomorrow. The package will include $1,400 stimulus checks to low and middle-income Americans. People who are unemployed will receive a $300 weekly bonus through the beginning of September. The bill also includes an increase to the child tax credit. Billions of dollars will go to vaccine distribution, testing, as well as state, local, and tribal governments. The Senate passed the measure along party lines this weekend. Lawmakers sat through more than 24 hours of voting on amendments to the bill, including the elimination of the $15 an hour federal minimum wage. Democrats stood up and cheered as Senator Patrick Leahy announced the 50-49 vote margin. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the vote marked, quote, a great day for this country. Senator Tim Kaine was in Washington for those votes. He's a Democrat from Virginia. He sits on the Senate Armed Services, Budget, Foreign Relations, and Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions committees, and joins us now from Richmond. Senator Kaine, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Hey, Tanya, good to be here.
So Democrats approved the American Rescue Plan through reconciliation, which requires only a simple majority. You sit on the Senate Budget Committee, whose chair, Vermont's Bernie Sanders, has said he wants to do more legislation through this process. What do you believe Democrats can pass through reconciliation? Will we see an infrastructure bill, for example?
Tanya, the rules about reconciliation are very complicated. The short format, things that are primarily budgetary in nature, if they don't involve policy changes, can be done via reconciliation. So the parliamentarian has to rule that each piece of it is more of a budgetary change than a policy change. And that's why, for example, she ruled that the minimum wage could not be included. But infrastructure, we already do infrastructure in this country. So the notion of doing more infrastructure, that would be primarily budgetary in nature. And my understanding is that the Biden administration, having done an emergency relief bill, now wants to do an economic recovery bill with infrastructure right at the heart of it.
And Senator Kaine, your Democratic colleague, West Virginia's Joe Manchin, is among those who say they do not want to keep passing legislation through reconciliation. He supports the 60-vote threshold of the filibuster. However, this Sunday, he did signal openness to making some changes. I want to play for you what he said. Let's listen.
The Senate is the most unique body of government in the world, of governing body in the world. It's deliberate. It's basically designed, Chuck, to make sure the minority has input. Right. That's exactly our founding fathers. And now, if you want to make it a little bit more painful, make them stand there and talk, I'm willing to look at any way we can, but I am not willing to take away the involvement of the minority.
So, Senator Kaine, you spoke on another network Thursday predicting that Democrats may need to abolish or at least reform the filibuster soon. What change can realistically happen with moderates such as Manchin, and what are the costs of not passing the party's agenda while Democrats have control of the White House and both chambers of Congress for the next 2 years?
Tanya, those are two very big questions. Let me say this. I would like to return to the Mr. Smith goes to Washington filibuster, not the Mitch McConnell filibuster. The first one is the traditional Senate filibuster. If you want to stand and stop the majority from passing something, you have to stand on your feet and do it to show the American public it's that important. The Mitch McConnell filibuster that we've evolved to is you just sort of check a box, oh, well, we want to filibuster this, but nobody has to stand on the floor to stop it, which means not only can you stop everything, but it also means the American public is not educated about the stakes. I was thrilled to hear Joe Manchin say that while we ought to have a filibuster, that's his opinion, he would be open to returning to the traditional talking filibuster rather than the check-the-box filibuster. And I think if that were to happen, it would make the Senate work much, much better.
So does it take just a simple majority to return to the talking filibuster?
It is pretty accepted, and both parties have done this during my now 8+ years in the Senate, that you can change a Senate rule or practice by a simple majority vote. You're not going to see this happen in the next couple of weeks, Tanya, but there will probably come a time when we will put a bill on the Senate floor that is overwhelmingly popular with the American public, and that Democrats have promised to do. And we'll see Republicans using artificial Senate rules to stop us from raising the minimum wage or doing voting rights reform. And at that point, my colleagues and I will have to ask ourselves, what's more important, the promises that we made to people or artificial Senate rules? And I think moving to a talking filibuster, as was the case for so long, would be a dramatic improvement.
So speaking of those promises, what is the future of the $15 federal minimum wage, Senator?
It looks like what we're going to have to do, Tanya, is take it through committee. So there's a bill that's introduced by Senator Sanders and others that I support. It will go into the appropriate Senate committee where both Democrats and Republicans can debate it, propose amendments. It will then come out on the floor. I strongly support the $15 minimum wage. I have a policy. I want to make sure that the nation has a minimum wage that gets a full-time worker with 2 dependents above the poverty level, rather than right now, a full-time worker with 2 dependents, and 2/3 of those are women, are significantly below the poverty level if they work for minimum wage. So I support that Sanders bill. But what we do is we take it through committee. Both sides would have the opportunity to propose amendments. We'll take it out on the floor, and then we'll see where we go. We know that the American public, and not just Democrats, Republicans too, overwhelmingly support raising a minimum wage that hasn't been raised since 2009.
And has there been any discussion about varying the federal minimum wage based on location? Because we know, obviously, that the cost of living varies dramatically in certain areas of the country.
Tanya, yes. When you talk about raising the minimum wage, there are a number of variables. How do you phase it in? Are there regional variations? Do you allow a lower minimum wage for 16-year-olds, getting their first job so that they can learn and get good work experience? Do you have a different minimum wage for tipped workers? All of these are important details, but they're details that can be worked out and negotiated. And I think we'll eventually find a position that every one of the 50-member Democratic caucus supports, and we'll be able to move a bill to the floor and then finally do what, frankly, should have been done a long time ago.
All right. Now, you also sit on the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees, and you expressed your anger at President Biden's recent decision to launch airstrikes against Syria in February without congressional approval. Last week, you introduced legislation with Indiana's Todd Young to repeal the 1991 and 2002 authorizations of military force that have led to decades of U.S. involvement in the Middle East and have sort of strengthened the executive branch powers in this regard. Why do you believe it's necessary for Congress to regain its constitutional authority on military action? And how could that soothe tensions with Iran, for example?
Tanya, the reason I am so fixated upon this, whether the president is Democratic or Republican, I've been even-handed, is constitutional, but it's also a value. The Constitution of this country is very clear. We should not go to war without a vote of Congress. And in that, we are different than virtually every other country. And the drafter of the Constitution's provisions, James Madison, said he thought that was the most important part of the entire Constitution. It expresses a value. We shouldn't put our troops into harm's way unless there's a political consensus that the mission is worth it. And how do you find the consensus? You have a debate and you have Congress vote on it. So yes, Todd Young, who's a Republican, he and I have proposed to eliminate the 2 Iraq authorizations, which are still out there. Even though Iraq is now an ally, not an adversary, they're a partner, we need to repeal the authorizations. And then we need to work together with the Biden administration to also significantly reform the 2001 authorization allowing the U.S. to take action against non-state terrorist groups. It's 20 years old. It's been used far differently than was the original intent all over the globe. And it's time to work with the Biden administration together to try to put some significant reforms and updates to that so that we're not in a forever war all over the globe.
Well, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your time.
Glad to be with you, Tanya. Thanks.